Right, Darpan, thanks very much for joining us this evening on ET Now. First things first, how do you really see these budget announcements coming in? Do these kickstart the Prime Minister's vision of a Viksit Bharat or a developed nation?
Sumita, I think the budget is fantastic on multiple fronts, both for the country and if I think more specifically to us at the Good Glamm Group, I think even for us and for the startup ecosystem. I think the Prime Minister's vision is extremely clear and sharp, and you can see a lot of announcements in this budget which go and build into that. If I have a few key takeaways from it, if he has put in so many encouraging building blocks for increased consumption, whether it's the change in the tax slab that would increase the disposable income for our people here. Whether it's, even if I think from a company standpoint, the reduction in TDS for e-commerce companies, that will allow for better cash flow there. I think the removal of the angel tax is incredible. It not only would encourage more investment, but as an entrepreneur, it also just frees up our mind from having to worry about receiving a tax notice from the taxman for equity funding that you've raised. So I think that, if you look at the emphasis he's placed on job creation, upskilling, there are a lot of building blocks in this budget, which I think are all moving into the direction of his vision for a Viksit Bharat by 2047.
Right, and we'll touch upon all of those announcements one by one. But let's first talk about the announcement specifically for the startup sector. Now, angel tax was a long pending demand, and that's really been paid heed to. But what kind of investments do you think will now drive into the ecosystem, even though the startup ecosystem hasn't completely recovered from last year's funding winter? And secondly, will this be a trigger to revive funding in the ecosystem?
I don't know if this will be a trigger to revive the winter funding, because see, the startup, the funding winter was driven more from macroeconomic factors, more from investors wanting startups to stop focusing only on growth and start showing clear profitability and better cash flows. So I think those fundamentals one has to do to really be able to see a change in the funding winter. Though I must say that I have already seen the change in the last 6 months. The winter has eased for earlier stage companies. And I think, yes, over there, the angel tax abolition will be helpful. I think for growth stage and larger stage companies, until the time you have clear profitability being shown, funding is still not easy to come by. Coming back to the angel tax, it eases the minds of the investors, which is great. But, you have to understand the amount of ease it gives to the entrepreneur. We as entrepreneurs are not used to dealing with tax notices, and things like that. And so I think that worry that you're going to be slapped with a tax notice for equity funding that you've raised, now that that's off your head, it really, I think it's very encouraging for entrepreneurs here. So I think it's a great move. It is only going to be value accretive to the whole funding ecosystem, and we look forward to seeing those benefits play out.
Right. So, Darpan, one big ask was also to give a push to generating more domestic pools of capital so that reliance can lessen on foreign money. Is the startup ecosystem facing any disappointment on that front?
Look, good incentives have been created for the same. Yes. Do they need to be created now? Can they come up a little later? I think that's also possible. I think, let's take a step back. Look at the public markets in India. There's been, until a few years ago, it was only, it was foreign capital that drove the public markets in India. Today, we all know what's happening. It is Indian domestic money that's driving the public market to record highs. The private markets will follow too. And I think, while today we are seeing a lot of international capital in the private markets, I think as domestic investors mature, you will start seeing them investing in the private markets too. Listen, Make in India, there's a whole value chain in Make in India, right? Capital is one part of the value chain. I think the Prime Minister's initiatives have started addressing all the different aspects to encourage Make in India. And I'm pretty sure capital, which is a pivotal raw material in our Make in India vision, now will also start becoming domestic Indian money very soon.
All right. Now, the startup story in semi-urban areas is one of the most interesting pieces that are playing out. The Prime Minister, of course, wants India to become the world's largest startup ecosystem. But how do you then look at the infra push that's been given vis-a-vis the expected push that it will give to boosting startups in these tier 2 and 3 towns and cities?
I am a firm believer that India is going to be, in the next few years, the startup capital of the world. We already are amongst the top two, three startup markets in the world, right? After Silicon Valley, I think India is amongst the top ones. China used to be a leading one, and of course, we know, China has its own problems now, and I think that's where the opportunity for Indian startups is incredible. So India is one of the leading places for the startup ecosystem. I think, look, we all know, for a developing country, investment in infrastructure has multiplier effects. That, I think, the key word on the agri push and infrastructure investments is multiplier effects. Yeah, it has multiplier effects on job creation. Job creation will, of course, have a multiplier effect on consumption. As you rightly said, a lot of this consumption is coming from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities here, which will, be very lucrative to a lot of startups that are addressing these markets as well. But there's another multiplier effect. There's a multiplier effect to also the whole manufacturing push that wants to happen. We can clearly see that the world has decided that they need to diversify the supply chain from China, and the next country that's happening that it's coming to is India, which means, and we all know, manufacturing in India is going through a boom and will continue to go through a boom. But then we need the infrastructure to support that manufacturing as well. So I think there'll be a multiplier effect there too. So I think the two words to describe the initiatives in agri and in infrastructure will be multiplier effect, going all the way from consumption to employment to manufacturing.
All right, so let me now ask you about the one big takeaway that was there in this year's budget, and that was about the issue of jobs. It's been a big concern during the Lok Sabha elections as well, and the government has finally paid heed to it. They have brought in some policies that are expected to kickstart job creation and, of course, skilling. But let me ask you, how do these incentives help in incentivizing hiring for private companies like yourselves?
100%, right? I think you can clearly see that the budget is, there are multiple schemes that the government has. I think there's a five-pronged approach here on ensuring that job creation happens. And I think that, while, like I said, the ALI scheme for ourselves as a company, not really sure how that is applicable, but what you can clearly see from what the government has done here, there is a clear push towards job creation. The five schemes that they've outlined, I think the 2 lakh crores that they've outlined, spread across all of those schemes, is necessary. It's necessary at the right time. And I think and again, it's tying in all the dots together, all the other initiatives that they've done as well. This is one very important cog for that entire engine to work. And I think they've clearly addressed that.
Absolutely. In fact, skilling is critical given the AI push that India wants. And of course, AI, deep tech, and quantum computing are areas that definitely need skilled professionals. So a great part on that as well. And let me ask you, lastly, for startups like yourselves, the CAPEX target has been kept the same. Help me understand the measures that have been given in terms of agriculture, housing, infra. How hopeful are you as a company that's based on consumption of a consumption push?
No, so I think, look, you mentioned AI. I mean, I know in this week's announcement, they didn't really talk about AI, but if you saw in March, they talked about the fund being created for AI development. And I think that's important. I think India is going to have some of the best AI brains in the coming years. We've not seen much come out of India as yet in AI, but you're seeing a lot of stuff that is going to be coming out very, very soon. So I think You asked the question on consumption. I think he's done everything right on driving consumption, whether it is what we talked about, job creation, whether it was reducing tax slabs, whether it is the tier 2, tier 3 consumers, pushing them through infra investments and creating more jobs over there, whether it's reducing the TDS. So I think he's done a lot on consumption. I think startups, all of us, and especially us, which are consumer focused startups, this has been a great budget. It's also probably come at the right time. I mean, you look at it, our economy is growing really, really well. Inflation has been in control, which is amazing for a country that's growing so fast here. And so I think with these kind of initiatives, a further boost in consumption, will be a godsend. If you see GDP per capita, countries when they cross the $2,000 GDP per capita, disposable income increases to a level where certain industries and categories see consumption increase exponentially. Beauty, personal care is one of them. And I think this budget will only help take that further.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.